Thank you. Thank you, Dan, for inviting me. Yes, I live in Sheffield. I've lived in Sheffield since 1970. I came to university in Sheffield. I've only been here 47 years, so I'm not really local yet, but I'm still working on it. But at the same time, why I really connect with this conference is to do with other factors. And I want to briefly mention two of them. The first is that since 2010, when I left, as Dan said, the Arts Council, I've worked 95% of my time outside the UK, focusing on forging connections and exploring questions for culture and the arts around Europe. So I lead a kind of nomadic professional life and a very reasonably stable domestic life. And I make the two work side by side. I realise it's quite unusual, but in a sense I can relate to you all coming here in the way that I related last week to an international conference that I attended along with Jan in Kiev. I was in Malmö yesterday and I shall be in Timisoara next week. So this kind of international connection is really much my world over the last few years. And the other reason is that somewhere deep in my DNA is a formative experience of theatre. More years ago than I can imagine. I'll try not to give too many anecdotes because it's kind of boring, but I just want to make a connection with theatre and audiences. More years ago than you can imagine, I worked in this building for 8 years, and it was my first job. And I built scenery and drove the van and built sets. And was very much part of, should we call, the production machine of a building, of a theatre of this kind, and loved it. But after 2 years, by a strange set of coincidences, I was thrown out into the world where we have slightly less, secure world, where I had to come face to face with other people who weren't making theatre. In that I joined the company who worked in schools and education, who worked in what was then called community theatre, who worked out in community venues. And it was a very steep learning curve about losing that separation that I'd experienced between making theatre and participating in from an audience point of view. And I'm just going to give you maybe three very quick anecdotes which express this steep learning curve. Two of them are in schools. At a very early stage, we worked in a school where there was always a formality. The set was built. The young people would arrive. In this school, the young people arrived led by their teachers. Every class were led by their teachers. They were sat in straight rows, and the teachers sat on the end of their row of their own class. And that was normal. But what was less normal was the occasion where throughout the play, which had a certain amount of comedy and space for the audience to react, every time the audience react, one particular teacher told the children to be quiet. That was a formative experience. Here we were creating a different kind of theatre. And the second one, which is similar, is this was a tour of the Harold Pinter's The Dumb Waiter in secondary schools. And it was a regular occurrence that in these performances, a longer performance, that at a certain stage in the performance, a bell would ring for maybe 5 seconds, and the play would stop, and the actors would pause, the bell would stop, and they would carry on. The bell was to change lessons. But only once this happened, when the bell rang, the actors stopped, and half the audience stood up and slowly walked out of the auditorium, led by their teacher. It took some time for them to work their way out. They weren't particularly quiet. They all went out, they shut the door. After this pause, which you could call a Pinterian pause, the play was resumed. Except that 5 minutes later, the same door opened, another group of pupils filed slowly in, fill the seats that had been vacated, because their job was to come for the second half of the play. It was their class. This is another thing which doesn't happen in theatres, but is part of the learning experience about what the audience and the theatre mean together in a public space. This is something which has stayed with me. And the final one is I'm forever grateful to a man called Brian White, who lived and worked in Penistone, which Helen will know well, which is a town maybe half an hour north of here in the sub-region. We were taking a community-based production, which was a socially engaged play, which we had commissioned, which had a flavour of the region, which was relevant, which was contemporary. We produced the work, and all he had to do was to take our posters and sell our tickets. This is a normal way we thought. And as a young 24-year-old, 25-year-old, I thought this was a very easy thing to do. We make the play, you sell the tickets, we all have a good time. And Brian White, who was a community education officer, turned round to me and said, why? He said to me, if you really want to engage your theatre with Penistone, the first thing you need to do is engage in a dialogue with Penistone, to walk the streets of Penistone, to meet some people, to listen, not just talk. And at the time, you know, I was busy. I had a lot to do. And I found this really quite oppressive, this response. But the more over the years I thought about it, the more I realised that the 2 days I spent walking around the streets of Penistone, handing out leaflets, entering shops, meeting people, going to the school, and so on, created a whole different relationship between us as a theatre and that audience. Whether it changed the experience, I don't know, but it certainly changed my thinking about how we work, yes, in fantastic theatres such as the Crucible, but also engage in relationships with wider communities. So they're my only three anecdotes. I'm not going to give you any more during the next 2 days, but I just wanted to show a sense of how I feel personally that I connect with this subject. So in a moment I'm going to introduce Helen, but just a quick word about the rest of the afternoon. First of all, I'm speaking English. You've noticed this, and we're all speaking English, and I hope this is fine for you all. If at any point during the course of these sessions, you feel there's something you really aren't following, you want to repeat it or clarified, please do feel free to say. We'll carry on. We sometimes speak much too fast, me included, but it is important that we all can engage equally in this session. So I'm just asking regular English speakers like me to speak slower, and for everybody else, if you feel you want something repeated or clarified, please do say. This is informal. We can talk to each other. I'm going to keep time. We're half an hour late, so I've already failed. But I'm going to try just to keep us moving forward. I don't want to be restrictive, but if we don't keep moving forward, some people are not going to have a chance either to discuss or to present in a way which is good for everybody. So I'll try and push things forward. And the other thing I'd like us all to think about during these 2 days is I've attended a lot of pan-European meetings, and they're great. I love them. They're not always easy, as we know. And one of the things that isn't easy is that maybe our hope, our ambition in these meetings is that we all can achieve consensus, that we're going to have a space where we can all agree with each other, we can all get on, we can all share perspectives. The reality is we come from very different backgrounds, and it's not going to happen. And I've understood this slowly, but actually I've come to realise that not understanding each other, not agreeing, is perhaps what's most interesting about such meetings. So really, I hope we can find a way to give ourselves space to disagree. When we feel there's a different perspective, to express the perspective, and let's get those arguments or disagreements out. If we get towards being blocked, if people start taking their jackets off, okay, we'll cool it. But I do want to help us to feel free to air our disagreements, because actually I think that's the way we learn on these occasions. So that's my mini start to the process. I'm going to, the afternoon, if you have your plans in front of you, we'll change the time slightly, but we have Helen giving us a keynote, followed by a session on theatre as a public service. Then we have coffee. Then there is a session on pricing and ticketing, and a final session which will be dealing with artistic and managerial challenges. So that's our session. We'll try to make sure there's always time to discuss at the end of each of these sessions. In fact, they'll all follow a similar